I'm going to show you how I do this in Gradebook. I'll be honest with you, this is way back. Credit where credit is due. I did this presentation to the Eastwood staff with Alicia Ronchi, another history and English teacher at Eastwood. So you'll see some of her screen captures are in here. We did this presentation already together, and this is the messaging that we sent to the Eastwood staff, is that you can use this to triangulate. And that's where Gradebook, and I don't know, like, if you were around last year, maybe, or the year before, if you were around, you used Markbook. And I think that the weakest thing that we did for assessment was we handed every new teacher a Markbook CD. One, it was a CD, and that's kind of weird. And then gave the CD and said, here, use this, but don't use this. And Gradebook will do everything that you need it to do, and it will do it to a point. And there's some benefits of doing it because you're going to be in this anyway. So I just added this here from Growing Success, the idea of triangulation. I know you've looked at that as well. I think too, as a young teacher, it would be hard, I think, to wrap your head around how to do this in your classroom. And I don't want to maybe jump on what you've already talked about, but I can only imagine you don't know what you don't know. And in your educational experience, it was a lot of go to class, listen to what the teacher says, write the test, do the essay, get the mark. And the mark is added up from everything that you did, every product that you created. And it's really hard, I think, as teachers, we're kind of in the beginning of a constant pain. I think we're that says, here's what your mark is, and I'm confident that this is what your mark is because this is why I believe that to be so, and you can show the kids. Okay, so let's talk about what your options here. You have options. You can track assessment formally as an assessment, and I'll show you how to do that. You're probably already doing this, let's be honest. And then informally using the notes feature. And I'll show you as we move on not to use the comment feature, and I'll explain why. So, you're going to create an assessment. This is I would consider this to be a more formal observation or conversation that you had with the students. If you were running that small group assessment, you have 6 or 8 kids at a table with you, you've shown them something, you've worked through something, and now you're talking to them about it, and you are going to assess them based on a rubric or criteria that you've done, or just informally, but still you're going to peg it to an essential learning with a mark. This is what I would do. So when you're going to name it and describe it, you're going to mark it for weighting of 0 as learning. Just a comment about the weighting. So I was talking about this with a group of teachers this week. They were very concerned about the weighting feature in Gradebook. And I believe that the weighting feature is a leftover from Markbook. I wouldn't worry too much about the weightings, and to be honest, because you're going to look at each student individually, I always just keep my weightings at 3. And just, if I pick a number, any number, if they're all the same, it doesn't matter what the weighting is. I don't actually like this feature because I just want a snapshot of where they're at with everything. So feel free to do what you want. I mean, this is, you're gonna feel it, you're gonna try, you can make changes, but that's how I roll with it. And then evaluation type, conversation, and observation. You can see them right there. And I would be consistent in keeping it conversation and observation. If you start using like performance or report, it doesn't track it as nicely. If you keep it only in that product, conversation, observation, then you're okay. And the nice thing about doing it this way is that you can tie in the conversation observation data to the essential learning, right? You can say, so for art history, we have used historical thinking concepts as our essential learning. So if we're having a conversation about cause and consequence, I'm just going to check cause and consequence, and that will then go into my body of evidence for determining the mark on cause and consequence. So, and in this case, we've gone with historical significance as being the one we're going to look at, and we're going to level the conversation that we had. Kind of a nice, easy way to do it. You're going to see this when you look at the student, that each kid, when they have the sheet that you're going to look at, it will show up there. And then you can go through and you can level it, and then your note that you're writing goes into the comments section of the box. So this is where you're recording the data, but it's a little bit more formal because it's directly tied to an essential learning, and it has historical significance, and it has a level that's there. Cool. Yeah.
So just like if you're doing a small group conversation on the political significance of a battle in World War II, and they're all around you and you've got 4 kids, do you like determine the level in that instance with those 4 kids based on like who's contributing to the conversation?
Absolutely.
Responding?
Yep. Totally. And it wouldn't necessarily just be participation, right? I'm not going to mark their participation, but I am going to mark, I'm going to have some look fors that I have, and I'm going to see if the kind of the quality of their comment that they've made on it. And they know, they see all this, so they know what we're doing. It's not like some sneaky game that I'm trying to fool them that, hey, you're getting marked for this. But it's not like a mark per se, right? Because it's just going in as a conversation that we had about this, and then when it comes time to report in midterm marks, I can look at all of this and see where we're at for the historical significance, right? And it's basically, I look at it as I determine a mark for each of my essential learnings, and then they have that, then it calculates the mark for the course. And then I look at that to make sure it accurately reflects where it should be. Okay, so pros and cons of doing it this way. It's easy to track because it's just like any other assessment. You're already doing it. It keeps it nice and easy in the page that you look at for each individual student. It looks like marks and levels. We're very familiar with that. The negative is you can only see the specific comments if you go back into it. So you're going to see the mark, but you're not going to see the text. So if you're trying to remember where you were at in your thinking, like why was that a level 2, you have to go back in to see that. And you need to have pre-established conditions for the conversation, as we were saying. So you need to already know what you're looking for, and then check off that, yes, I saw that. And so I think, personally, I use the second way I'm going to show you. I save that side for the products, but it's whatever works for you. So this is what I do mostly, and I use notes in Gradebook. So here's where we go. And it is a little bit more time. It takes a little bit more time to do this, but it's okay. So you're gonna click on notes, and you see notes here. Don't use comments, and I'll talk about that in a second. And then everything you put in will come up in this bar graphy type thing here that you go to. Like that, for me, is the most important page in the whole thing, because that shows each student and where they're at. So, add a new note. Right here, we're going to keep it private. Select conversation or observation. That is essential. You must select either conversation or observation. Anything else disappears. Like you'll still have it, and if you click on the individual note, you can see it, but it won't be in that page if it's not marked as a conversation or observation. And that's from the drop down box here. So you can attach files. I personally have never done this before, because the way I do this, and it's just kind of, I think, how I've evolved in this, is that I've always written my observations and conversations. I've never recorded. So as fancy as the other things are that you're going to see, for me, it's easier to just type a few things out and save it and then move on. It's only so many hours in the day. See how I'm selling it? I'm always selling it. I don't need to sell it, but so, in here, this is how it will store it, and you'll be able to see that it was an observation or conversation, the date, if you edit it, and have it all here. I find this to be incredibly simple to use. You have the text, you can know exactly where your thinking was, and from your information, you can decide how that is going to change the numbers. Like I start with the product, and then I look at how that changes through the conversation observation. That's just how that's how I approach the marks. And it would be really cool if I started with the conversation and then let the observations and products change, but I'll be honest with you, that's not what I do. The product starts the formation, it's the first line, and then it changes as I do this work. And then when you click on the student achievement profile, you get this. And this is, I believe, the most important screen. And you should, I would say, look at this for every student as you are coming up with midterm and final marks. And interim marks. Never mind. So, this is going to have your notes as conversation observation. If you do not tag it as conversation observation, it will not show up here. And that's why you have to use those two. You can see in each category what they have. Some of it is informative. That's where the other assessments will show up. And then your notes are there. You can go and look at in each category, each essential learning, what the mark is. You can read what they've done, and then you can shift the mark as you need to, based on your conversation observation. Yep.
Can you tie the notes to the essential learning?
You can, I would make a note, so this is my colleague Elise put this together. I would put which essential learning, if it is, it's tied to. I also will keep my notes for if I'm worried about a kid who is struggling, if they missed stuff, that helps me remember where I'm at with that. Yep.
So I feel completely comfortable with raising grades based on calculation. So in my Shakespeare essay, they didn't demonstrate that they understand the text. I've talked to them enough that I know they did, so I can raise that. But when it comes to lowering grades, I get more nervous. Is it completely acceptable to, if a parent asks for a breakdown of all the marks that you have for them, to include observations and conversations in there?
I think you're totally okay to do that.
I know
It's.
Yeah.
I haven't decided, like usually if they're demonstrating, I totally understand why you're skeptical on that.
Yeah.
I think you can, I think you're okay to share that with parents if you wanted to. I don't think that's an expectation at all. But yeah, it's hard, right?
It's a gray area. Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure it is a gray area.
Yeah.
Not necessarily.
No, I think I don't see
Can I
what you're saying.
just, can I just add one thing to that, Dave?
Totally.
That it's not so much about the lowering mark, but it's about sharing with parents. Just gonna speak to it from an elementary lens. When I have a parent-teacher interview with someone in grade 2, and I'm sitting there at my table with a parent, I have some products but more what I have and what I share are my observations and my conversations. So I'm not like sending it home, like here's a screenshot of my observations and conversations, but I am sharing my, like, what I have in front of me. It's totally valid. It's evidence of student learning. So in terms of sharing, yeah, like if I have evidence, then, and you know what, parents are, I think, grateful and appreciative when they know that you heard their head, but you heard them and you saw them and you know them. So I think that's important.
Totally, and I would say, in my experience, I have never shown this to a parent. But I've had conversations with parents where I have verbally relayed this information. But as I'm running through this, I've never had that situation before. I think that I would be comfortable to show them the page. Although if you go to the parent view page, this doesn't show up.
We're going to jump in for just 1 second. So I think one of the things that you need to do is change your mindset, because you said, I don't feel comfortable lowering a grade, and you're not lowering a grade, you're still creating your evaluation of a student, right? And so those other pieces are just as important, and so don't feel like, oh, I'm lowering a student's grade. You're looking at the whole body of evidence and coming up with their final evaluation. So that may help you, coming from a past English teacher.
But they're not gonna see, right? They're not gonna see what their mark was before the conversation observation.
No, but they know all the products, like what it adds up to. Like, I'm supposed to be having 80, and why do I have 75? It's like, well, it's because I look at you and I don't like what I see. Like, that's basically how it's going to be read. Right?
Well, we have to change their mindset too, just like we have to change our own, right? So it's our messaging will help them get around that.
Dave, I'd jump in really quick, just to say to that one. I think it's a really, really good question, and traditionally people have used, like, if you think of that informal piece of observation and conversation, like off the top of our head, like, the kid tanked the test, but I had a great conversation during the week, so I'm going to use this, because I've seen that to raise their mark. I would say you're, again, as Steph highlighted, if it's a body of evidence, right? You're looking at it. So if they did really good in one product, but you had lots of conversations and you actually see it as a lower level, I think you are justified in, again, it's a representation of where you see your student now with all the evidence you have. I would caution all of you though, if you're going to go, the products say this, and I'm actually lowering it based off my observations and conversations, which shouldn't happen, but if you're in that space and it does, I would have that documented. I wouldn't do it off the top of your head. Like the products say the kid's an 80, but my observations is 75, so I'm lowering the kid's mark 5%. You can be justified in doing that if that's what you've observed from the student, but if you don't have those documented pieces and you're saying that's off the top of my head, I would say you're opening yourself up for some problems for justifying that mark.
So, Shannon, I'll give you a second. This is such a hypothetical, right? Because I feel like we probably don't do this. If you're having the conversation and observations leading up and they create the product, let's be honest, usually the product matches what you've seen in class, right? And we're totally talking about hypotheticals, but when I go to this, I look at the student achievement profile, I look at all of the entries that I have for each essential learning, and then I come up with a number for that essential learning. So I would say for myself personally, I'm not, like, I look at it as a whole, like holistically for each essential learning. And, but as I said too, it's the when I organize it like this, the products end up here, and then the observation and conversations are here. So I think this is totally an evolution. I've also, as we move to this, I don't, like when you guys were in high school, do you remember did you have markbook printouts when you were in high school, and then the teacher would like tape them up on the door and you'd go and look at them on the door? That is over, like that's done. I provide marks for my students at midterm. I provide a mark that represents the 70% term work mark, and then a final grade. So they're getting 3 marks for me over the course of the semester. So this is a huge process. It's a huge process to go through and track each kid and triangulate each kid for each essential learning. Okay.
So I was going to ask if you have an example of like a look for a conversation or an observation, because we're trying right now for our final evaluation project to make a rubric that incorporates conversations and observations. And it's really hard because like you can't track or you can't assess or evaluate participation with the grades, right? So then when you're looking at like, well, what is a level 3 in terms of my observation for
let's say, like, their critical thinking and visual expression essential learning, like, I don't know, how do I create, and it's a little bit easier, I think, with conversations, because you can still tie, like, you know, the learning goal oftentimes to a conversation, but in terms of an observation, I find that that's a little bit harder, as opposed to being like, yep, they did it, I saw it in class. Like, how is that different from the product itself?
So, and again, I feel like doing this in history, I'm at such an advantage because I think it's easy. If I was doing this in math or in science, maybe science would be easy. If I was doing this in math, I would have a harder time in that, because if you're demonstrating in the conversation, you're probably able to put pen to paper and do it as well. But in history, where I rely on this very heavily, so I'll focus on continuity of change, let's say. So I'm gonna have photographs for the kids, and we're going to look at each primary, like usually primary source evidence, it could be a letter, picture, whatever. And then I'm going to look at how they can relate it to either something we've already talked about in the course, or something that they know, whether it's today or in the more recent past, and look at how that topic is either the same or different. So I'm giving them the starting point, and then I want to see where they go from there. And that's, but I tie it into the historical thinking concepts. That is the language that we use in my class every day. So that's how when I talk about criteria, our criteria today would be historical perspective. How have you done in thinking about the past from the perspective of the people that were living the past? And then I would assess it. But again, I think it's history and I think it's easy. So I think it gets a little bit muddier in some of the other courses. But I think English would be a fairly easy way to do it as well. Yep.
Do you think this model of education could have produced an Aristotle or an
Oh, I think totally. Totally. I mean, we're letting, like, I mean, you wouldn't necessarily be pegged into being a sculptor or a painter, right? You could be both. And that we're really, I think, encouraging kids to follow their passion, I think. And we're assessing them in a way that promotes creativity. And I think, you know, I don't want to get too deep on that educational philosophy, and they're going to totally make fun of me for going too long, as I always do. I think we're giving the kids a chance to be them, and we're going to meet them where they're at. I think that's what a good teacher does. We meet the kids where they're at. Okay, don't use comments because it goes to everybody. Anybody who has admin privileges in Gradebook will see your comments, and it's totally annoying. Somebody will come talk to you and tell you to stop doing that. Okay, I don't want to, like, great, I really appreciate that you're using that feature. I don't need an email for it every time. Okay, note section is less formal. You want to consider the parent view does not show the notes, so that might be something you want to take into consideration. So I think you should do this because I think it's where we live. Everything is in one place. I'm not flipping back between two different apps. I think it's easy to communicate with students and parents because you have everything in one place and it's pretty. It is easy to share with spec ed, student success, and administrators. So anybody who is, like, as an LST, I have admin privileges in Gradebook, in Compass, administrator, spec ed, and student success do as well. So you can just say, take a look at the student and see which essential learnings they're struggling with or missing. It puts the communication piece on them. I don't have to say, hey, here's my my mark board, sorry Andy, and take a look at this. They already have it. And I believe that eventually, you know, like when a kid is unsuccessful in your class and you have to bring evidence of what you did to the administrator, I think eventually if I was an administrator, I would say, if you're tracking everything in Gradebook, I don't need anything from you, I'll go take a look at it. So it will save you a step down the road. Okay. Yep.
Can you show us how to omit?
There's just a click box, a check box.